You won't believe what happened when Karen's guests started screaming at my family, and the whole thing was caught on camera. We bought the lake cabin to get away from everything, traffic, noise, work stress, and just reconnect with nature and each other. The lakefront view, the tall pine trees, the peaceful sunsets, it felt like we had finally found our slice of heaven. The cabin wasn't huge, but it was ours. And it sat just far enough from the HOA-governed properties to give us a sense of freedom. At least, that's what we thought. Enter Karen. We met her the first week we moved in, or rather, she introduced herself before we even unloaded our last box. Hi, I'm Karen. I'm on the HOA board next door. We like to keep things peaceful around here, so just letting you know the rules. She spoke like we were moving into her neighborhood, not our own private land. I politely told her we weren't under HOA rules, but that we'd be respectful neighbors. She didn't like that. You could see it in the way her smile dropped half an inch. From that day on, she made it her personal mission to make our stay miserable. She'd glare at us from her porch anytime we had a guest over. If our music was even slightly audible, we'd get a knock on the door within minutes. Once, she complained that our grill's smoke was drifting toward her direction. Mind you, there was an entire row of trees between our properties. But I didn't want drama. I kept things cool, respectful, and made sure to never give her a real reason to escalate. And for a while, she stayed on her side of the line, until the birthday weekend. My son was turning 12. He loves the outdoors, so we invited a few family friends with kids and decided to throw a lakeside cookout. We had burgers, hot dogs, soda, some light music, and a ton of laughter. Nothing wild. No alcohol, no loudspeakers, nothing that would disturb anyone on a normal day. It was just a wholesome family celebration. But to Karen and her entitled friends, it was apparently a personal attack. I first noticed them standing in a cluster at the edge of her property, staring toward our cabin. At first I thought maybe they were just curious, but then I saw one of them, a guy in his 40s, red polo, sunglasses on, pointing aggressively in our direction. I walked over to make sure everything was okay. Before I could even greet them, one of the women in the group yelled, "You people are too loud. This isn't a college frat party." I blinked, confused. "It's a kid's birthday party," I said calmly. "We're not doing anything wrong." That's when Red Polo guy stepped forward and snapped, "You're ruining our lake view. These people don't belong here. These people." My blood boiled. I wanted to say something, but my wife gave me a look, one that said, "Don't fall into the trap." So I nodded and walked back. But they weren't done. 10 minutes later, two of them wandered closer to the property line, one even pretending to look for lost sunglasses near the bushes separating our yards. My brother-in-law asked them to step back, and they responded with curses and threats. The kids started getting nervous. My son tugged my shirt and said, "Dad, are those people mad at us?" That's when I knew I needed to act. See, I'd recently installed a full security camera system around the cabin. After Karen's previous antics, I figured it'd be good to have proof in case things went south. The cameras had motion detection, full HD, and covered all angles, including the border between our land and Karen's. I quietly checked the live feed from my phone. Everything was being recorded. Then came the final blow. Karen herself came marching down the path from her cabin, wearing oversized sunglasses and carrying a glass of wine. She didn't say hello. She didn't knock. She just started yelling, "You people are disrupting the entire neighborhood. I'm calling the police." My wife tried to reason with her, "Karen, please, we're just having a birthday celebration for our son. You can see the kids here. This isn't anything wild." But she was beyond logic. "You're trespassing on HOA land, and you've been reported," she shouted. I reminded her, again, that we were not part of the HOA and that our land deed said exactly that. But Karen didn't care. She took out her phone and dialed 911 right in front of us. She started exaggerating everything. Yes, there's a group of people causing a disturbance. I think they're drunk. They've threatened us. We feel unsafe. I was shocked. This wasn't just overreaction, this was straight up lying to the police. I walked calmly up to her and pointed at the camera mounted right on the cabin's porch. Karen, just so you know, everything that happened is on camera. Every word. Every threat. You sure you want to lie on a police call? Her face twitched. For a second, I thought she might back off, but she didn't. She just turned away and kept talking to the dispatcher, spinning her story like she was the victim of a home invasion. I turned to my family and said, let's stay calm. This is going to backfire, hard. My brother-in-law laughed nervously. The kids peeked out the window, worried. We turned off the music and gathered on the porch. I checked the footage again and made sure the time stamps were clear. It was all there. I had no doubt the cops would see the truth when they arrived. About 20 minutes after Karen made the call, we heard the sound of tires crunching gravel, and 2 sheriff patrol cars pulled up near the main road leading to our cabin. Karen stood up straighter the moment she saw them, tossing her wine glass onto her porch table like she had just been vindicated. She practically sprinted toward the deputies before they'd even gotten out of their vehicles. From where we were sitting on the porch, we could hear her animated voice rambling off complaints. They were shouting at us, "Officer." My guests were threatened. They had music blaring, and I think some of them were drinking. I saw someone stumbling. It's out of control over there. The 2 deputies, 1 male and 1 female, listened patiently but didn't seem alarmed. In fact, I noticed the female deputy glance past Karen's shoulder toward our property, her expression more curious than concerned. I stood up and walked to the end of our porch to meet them halfway, keeping my hands in plain sight and my voice calm. The male deputy gave a polite nod. "Afternoon, sir. We've received a call about a disturbance. Can we speak with you?" I nodded. "Of course, officers. I'd like to clear this up. We're having a small family birthday party. There's no alcohol, no one is drunk, and nothing's been damaged. Also, for full transparency, we have everything on camera." I motioned to the mounted security camera above the porch door. Karen, who had followed behind them, scoffed loudly. "He's trying to twist the story." They were screaming and trespassing. The deputies exchanged a quick glance. The female officer asked me to show her the footage if I had it readily available. I pulled out my phone and loaded the live camera app. Within seconds, I had the saved footage ready, starting from the moment Karen's guests began yelling across the property line all the way to Karen making the 911 call. The male deputy leaned in and watched closely. The tension in his posture eased visibly as he saw the clip of Karen's guest aggressively shouting at my brother-in-law and another one attempting to walk into our yard while claiming we didn't belong there. The female deputy raised an eyebrow as she watched the video. "So this took place on your property?" she asked. I nodded and showed her the corner marker in the footage. "Yes, ma'am. That's our boundary marker. We're not in the HOA, and we've been dealing with this kind of thing since we moved in." She asked to see my property deed. I handed her a laminated copy that I kept near the front door, just in case HOA drama ever got too heated. After reviewing the document and comparing it to the GPS coordinates from their onboard system, the officers had all the confirmation they needed. Karen, who had gone oddly silent during the footage review, suddenly started up again. They must have edited that video. "You don't understand what we've been dealing with. That party is a nuisance. I have a right to peaceful enjoyment of my property." The male deputy turned toward her, his tone firmer now. "Ma'am, based on the footage we've seen and the property lines verified, there's no evidence that these folks did anything unlawful. In fact, there's clear evidence of harassment from your guests and an attempt to cross into their land. That could be considered trespassing." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. The female officer added, "And just so you're aware, filing a false police report is a criminal offense. We're not going to pursue it this time, but we do need to make note of your complaint, and it'll go on record." Karen's face turned red. She tried to speak, but no words came out. Her guests, who had been peeking from behind her porch railing, ducked back as soon as the officers turned their heads. I noticed the red polo guy wasn't looking so smug anymore. The male deputy asked me if I wanted to press charges for harassment or attempted trespassing. I thought about it for a moment. My son had just come back outside, holding a slice of cake, clearly trying to pretend everything was normal. My wife stood behind him, watching me with a look that said, "We just want peace." So I shook my head. "No, officer. I'm not looking for revenge. I just want them to stop treating us like we're unwelcome in our own home." The deputy gave me a respectful nod. "Understood, sir. We'll write this up as a resolved conflict with documented footage and GPS confirmation of property lines. If anything else happens, don't hesitate to call us directly." As they turned to leave, the female deputy looked back at Karen and said, "Ma'am, I suggest you remind your guests to respect property boundaries in the future." The patrol cars pulled away, and for a few long seconds, everything was completely quiet. Karen slowly turned around and walked back to her porch. Her guests began whispering furiously. I could feel the shift in energy. They knew they had been caught. My family returned to the table. My wife handed me a soda, and my son said, "Dad, are we okay?" I smiled and ruffled his hair. "We're better than okay, buddy. We handled it right." My brother-in-law laughed, "Man, I wish we could post that video online. That was wild." I looked down at the footage again, watching the part where Karen's guest tried to step onto our lawn and got caught in 4K. "You know," I said, "maybe I will post it. People need to see what happens when entitled folks mess with the wrong family." Everyone chuckled, the tension finally lifting. We turned the music back on, just a little lower, and went back to enjoying what was left of the afternoon. But from that point on, one thing was clear: the days of Karen intimidating us were officially over. The next morning, the sun rose just like any other day at the lake, casting golden reflections across the still water, but something was different. There was a strange calm in the air. Karen's cabin, usually filled with loud chatter or clinking glasses, was completely quiet. Curtains drawn, deck empty, and not a single sign of movement. It was as if the entire group had vanished overnight. I wasn't surprised. They probably knew they had made a scene and didn't want to face the aftermath. Still, part of me wondered if Karen was planning something new. With people like her, you never really let your guard down. I spent the early morning rewatching the footage from the previous day, just to make sure I had all the angles and timestamps documented. The cameras had picked up everything. The shouting, the threats, the trespassing attempt, and even Karen's smug face during the fake 911 call. It was all right there, crystal clear. I backed everything up to a flash drive and then saved copies in the cloud just in case. You never know when you'll need receipts again. By mid-morning, a few other neighbors had stopped by after hearing about what happened. The lakeside community wasn't that big, and word traveled fast. One couple from 2 cabins down brought over coffee and pastries and asked if we were okay. "We always knew she was difficult," the woman said, shaking her head. "But we didn't know it had gotten this bad." I told them the whole story, and they were shocked. Turns out, we weren't the only ones Karen had targeted. Apparently, she'd made complaints about a family kayaking too early in the morning once and had even tried to get someone fined for splashing too loudly during a swim. As the morning passed, something strange happened. One of Karen's guests, a man I didn't recognize from the day before, came walking down the gravel path toward our cabin. He looked embarrassed. Maybe in his mid-50s, gray hair, wearing a flannel shirt, holding a small bag in his hand. My wife stepped out cautiously as I stood to greet him. "Morning," he said, avoiding eye contact at first. I was here yesterday. One of Karen's guests. Look, I just wanted to say, sorry. We didn't realize how things really were. Karen told us you were some squatters causing trouble on public land. That's why some of us got angry. She never told us this was your private property." I nodded, not entirely surprised. "Yeah, she's been twisting the truth ever since we moved in." The man sighed and handed me the bag. Inside were a few muffins, a handwritten apology note, and a gift card to the local hardware store. "It's not much," he said. "But I wanted to do the right thing. I know what we did yesterday was wrong." And once I saw her yelling and making that call, I knew something was off. My wife smiled gently and said, "Well, we appreciate you coming. That takes guts." He nodded again and walked back toward Karen's cabin, where I noticed he didn't go inside. He grabbed a suitcase from the deck, tossed it in his car, and drove off. Maybe we weren't the only ones fed up. Later that day, I received a phone call from the HOA president, someone named Martin who I had only heard about but never met in person. He introduced himself and got straight to the point. "I heard about what happened with Karen. I want to formally apologize. Even though you're not under our HOA jurisdiction, she had no right to treat you like that. I've received complaints from other homeowners as well, and we're addressing it." I thanked him, genuinely surprised by how professional he sounded. He also asked if I could send over the footage for their records. "We're considering taking action within our HOA rules," he added. "Her behavior has become a serious problem." I sent the video files immediately, along with a written timeline of what happened. It felt like finally, after months of dealing with constant passive-aggressive nonsense, we were being heard. That evening, I uploaded a shorter, edited version of the video to a private YouTube channel I had made months earlier for lake cabin updates and DIY renovations. I titled it, "Karen's Guests Rage at Family Birthday, Then Cops Arrive and the Truth Comes Out." I blurred the faces of the guests and officers for privacy, but kept Karen's face visible. After all, she was the one who escalated things. I didn't expect much from it, maybe a few hundred views from friends and neighbors. But by the next morning, it had over 15,000 views. Comments poured in. People were outraged on our behalf. Entitlement caught in 4K. Why are Karens always the first to call the cops over nothing? Good on you for staying calm and having proof. I was shocked, honestly. I hadn't even shared the link widely. It seemed people had found it organically and started sharing. My inbox was full of supportive messages, including one from a local news blogger who wanted to do a story on lakefront property disputes. Even more shocking, I got a message request from someone who claimed to be Karen's niece. She said, "I'm really sorry about what happened. My aunts always had control issues. I saw the video, it's embarrassing, but I'm glad someone finally called her out. It was surreal seeing so many people from all over weigh in on something that happened in our backyard." Karen stayed quiet after that. Her guests were gone by Monday morning. No more loud voices, no more wine glasses clinking on the deck. She barely stepped outside. When she did, she avoided eye contact. And the few times I saw her walking toward the lake, she would turn back around if anyone else was nearby. I knew the HOA had probably confronted her. Whether they removed her from the board or gave her a final warning, I wasn't sure. But something had changed. Meanwhile, our family went back to enjoying the cabin like we originally planned. We fished. We kayaked. My son built a fort out of fallen branches and old tarps. Every now and then, he'd point to the corner of the yard and joke, "Hey Dad, want to watch the Karen movie again?" We'd laugh. Because now, it wasn't a stress, it was a victory. A memory of when we stood our ground, stayed calm, and let the truth speak louder than the lies. A week passed after the incident, and life at the lake finally began to feel normal again, peaceful, like it was meant to be. The sunrises were uninterrupted by yelling neighbors, and the cool evening breeze no longer carried the sound of passive-aggressive complaints. The silence from Karen's cabin was almost suspicious, but I wasn't about to complain. I was finally able to sip my coffee on the porch without worrying about who was watching or which made-up violation was about to be tossed my way. Still, the fact that she hadn't said a word or even looked in our direction since the sheriff's visit made me think she wasn't done just yet. People like her rarely walk away quietly. But this time, I was prepared. My video had unexpectedly taken on a life of its own. What started as a simple post on a small channel had now been shared across social media platforms. Within a few days, it had crossed 100,000 views. I was receiving messages from people all across the country. Some sharing their own nightmare HOA stories, others simply cheering us on for standing our ground. I hadn't expected to become the face of lakefront homeowner justice, but I didn't mind. If my experience helped someone else deal with their own version of Karen, then it was worth it. I started updating the channel with follow-ups, answering common questions, and explaining how we kept everything legal and respectful during the confrontation. People appreciated the level-headed approach, and it felt good to turn a negative experience into something positive and useful. Then came the letter. One morning, tucked between our usual mail and a pizza flyer, was a thick envelope with the HOA's logo stamped on it. Even though we weren't members, my curiosity got the best of me. Inside was a formal statement from the HOA board addressed to Karen, and carbon copied to me. It was an official notice of disciplinary action. The letter outlined multiple violations of community behavior standards, false representation of authority, and public disturbance caused by both her and her guests. It stated that her privileges as an HOA board member had been suspended indefinitely, pending a vote from the wider membership. It also mentioned that multiple residents had come forward to file complaints after watching the video online. Apparently, our encounter had opened the floodgates, and years' worth of frustration with her had finally boiled over. I almost laughed out loud reading it. The queen of the HOA, dethroned by her own ego and a set of well-placed security cameras. My wife and I shared a long look and then a high five. "Told you those cameras would come in handy," she said with a grin. Still, we kept the celebration low-key. Karen hadn't made any direct moves since the incident, but we knew better than to underestimate her. We didn't want to give her even the tiniest excuse to play the victim again. Later that day, my son and I took the canoe out on the lake. It was one of those perfect afternoons, the sky a soft blue, water like glass, not a single ripple out of place. As we paddled near the edge of our property, I saw Karen standing on her deck, arms folded, staring directly at us. No wave, no greeting, just that cold, judgmental glare she'd perfected. My son noticed too and leaned over to whisper, "Is she mad we're floating in the water now?" I chuckled. Probably. But guess what? She doesn't own the lake, and we're not doing anything wrong. He smiled and leaned back, dipping his hand in the water as we floated past. The rest of the summer went by without any major incidents. A few new neighbors moved into a cabin down the road, and I made sure to introduce myself early, just to set a friendly tone. They'd already heard about the camera guy with the crazy neighbor, and we laughed about how internet fame can find you in the strangest ways. I never mentioned Karen by name, but I did suggest they invest in a security system just to be safe. No one argued. One afternoon, I was out by the dock replacing a few rotted boards when a black SUV pulled up in Karen's driveway. Out stepped a woman in a business suit holding a briefcase. She walked straight up to Karen's front door, knocked twice, and after a short conversation, Karen followed her inside. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but it was hard to ignore the angry shouting that followed. Something about legal exposure and video evidence drifted through the breeze. I didn't know the full story, but I had a hunch that Karen might be facing more serious consequences than just an HOA suspension. I never saw that SUV again, but Karen was noticeably quieter after that visit. Eventually, the video hit 250,000 views. A local news station reached out asking for an interview. I declined. Fame wasn't the goal here. I didn't want to escalate things further or embarrass anyone beyond what had already happened. I just wanted to live in peace. Still, I couldn't deny that I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Not because Karen got humiliated, but because justice had been served without shouting, violence, or revenge. The cameras told the truth, and that was all I ever needed. That fall, as the leaves turned gold and orange, I added a few new updates to the cabin: stronger motion lights, a reinforced fence near the property line, and a sign that said, "Private property, monitored 24/7. It wasn't meant as a threat, just a reminder. One that made things very clear. We were done being bullied. Done being treated like guests on our own land. I still see Karen from time to time. She walks to the mailbox with her head low, avoids eye contact with anyone, and no longer hosts loud parties or uninvited guests. Her reign of control is over, and the neighborhood has never felt more peaceful. People stop to chat, share drinks by the dock, and kids ride bikes without being scolded for disturbing the view. It's amazing what happens when one person stops trying to control everyone else. As for us, we've never been happier. The cabin feels like home again. My son still tells the story to his friends like it's a movie plot. My dad caught a Karen in the wild, he says proudly. I just smile and shake my head. Because in the end, it wasn't about winning a battle. It was about standing up for our right to live freely, calmly, and with dignity. And thanks to one camera, one calm response, and a whole lot of patience, we got exactly that.